Oh, I don't follow the research guidelines because everybody's different and experience counts for the most. So that sounds like an interesting statement, and it's possible that there are many practitioners out there who abide by this kind of rule. Now, everybody is different, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should just ignore research guidelines and just go with the flow based on what we found has worked before. Because at the end of the day, it's got to be about probability. So if we look at the research behind something, then it's going to give us more higher probability things that are going to be effective, and they're going to be legitimately effective more than, say, a placebo effect, because large studies on randomized controlled trials or systematic reviews is going to highlight this to us. So today we're going to look at how successful treatment is when we compare non-guideline driven treatments versus guideline driven treatments, and specifically how important this is for acute lower back pain, which is lower back pain that you've not had for all that long. Now, this is hopefully going to highlight why it's so important that we should always be reading, looking at research, keeping ourselves up to date, because of course if we find out that, you know, guideline driven treatment is the way to go, you need to know the guidelines. You need to know what actually is effective out there. So this was a cohort study of over 5,000 people, and they all had acute lower back pain. So they looked at how many people had acute back pain, and then it turned into chronic lower back pain, therefore it was more long-standing pain, and they found that overall 32% of people actually turned from acute back pain into chronic back pain sufferers. Now, they had to look at risk factors towards whether they were likely to become chronic back pain sufferers, because we do know there is a list of variables which are risk factors for this. So they split the people into 3 groups for risk factor. So that was low risk factor, medium risk factor, and high risk factor as to whether they would go on to become chronic back pain sufferers. Now, the known risk factors for turning into a chronic back pain patient are actually obesity, smoking, severe and very severe baseline disability, diagnosed depression or anxiety, and there are many others as well. So what are the actual recommendations in the guidelines for acute lower back pain? So things like heat, massage, acupuncture, and spinal manipulation are some examples of what the acute back pain guideline treatments are recommended. Whereas not being recommended is diagnostic imaging, being referred to a specialist, or being prescribed opioid medication in the absence of any red flags. Now, you would assume that it's going to be fairly common practice that the guideline-based treatments are going to be the ones that are just inherently done, so this research is not really required, but you'd be surprised. So 30% of the back pain sufferers actually got medications that aren't recommended, and 65% of those medications were actually opioids. 24% either got an X-ray, a CT scan, or an MRI scan, and 6% were referred to a specialist. And out of them, 62% were surgery referrals. So what were the results in total? Now, we have to do this per group. So in the low risk group, people were 1.39 times higher to go on to chronic back pain if they had non-guideline treatments. In the median group, this was 1.88 times greater risk of going on to chronic back pain. And the high risk group were 2.16 times more likely to go on to chronic back pain, again, if they had the non-guideline treatments. So overall, this shows you that if early treatments with acute back pain are not based on guidelines, then there is a higher chance of going on to further chronic low back pain. So this is important to make sure that you stick to more guideline-based treatments, and certainly, you know, this should make sense anyway, but clearly, as we mentioned before, this isn't commonplace as you might think. A lot of people go on for imaging, opioids, and so on and so forth. So certainly with acute back pain, this is how it applies. So anyway, that's it for this video, and I'll see you next time.